Yes, hi.
Shawn,
Hey, Cam, how are you?
all good, man. How are you?
All right, all right. That was quick. Look at this efficient IG live here. The request was waiting for me and everything.
Man, I try. I do try. If anything I have, it's punctuality.
If we've learned nothing from verses,
That's it. That's
it's
it.
if we
Exactly.
want to we want to get this, make sure we're connected.
Exactly, man. How you doing, mate? How you doing?
I am doing well. I'm doing well. I'm just
Yeah,
hanging out and very excited to talk some cube and some other stuff.
man. Cube is all over the timeline right now. So I'm I'm happy to talk Cube.
Yes.
I'm sure the people who've listened to the episodes, man, you smashed that. You smashed that. The feedback has been great, Shawn.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun to do, and for a lot of the reasons that I thought it might be, which I'm sure we'll get into in a minute. But it was a blast. It was great to listen back to,
Mm-hmm.
and to share with people. Honestly, it was like, oh, I guess I actually kind of made sense on some of this stuff here.
I thought it was very coherent, very succinct. Um, but there was so much I so much to talk to you about generally about Cube after like putting the phone down. I was like, wow, there was so much we could have got into. So I suppose I'm going to address a bit of it with this, Shawn, with this
Sure.
like chat. Um, my first thing I was thinking was because this series we've dropped best three album runs. There have been a few in the 90s. I
Hmm.
approached you as one of the first people and I gave you a selection.
Hmm.
And pretty much off the bat, you went Ice Cube, Ice
Hmm.
Cube. I want Ice Cube. So I was wondering why. Why was it Cube who stood out of that? De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, OutKast. Why was it Cube that you really got going?
Yeah, sure. Well, a good part of it was honestly the challenge. The idea that there's stuff on those records, like I was saying on the show, that I didn't feel comfortable with and didn't necessarily feel like I could defend. And I like the idea of an artist, being uncomfortable, being someone who was kind of in those gray areas and not, yeah, and just like I like the idea of that edginess and trying to kind of thread that needle.
Mm,
uh I would say also honestly that America's Most Wanted was so formative to me
mm,
that I welcomed the chance to kind of sound off about it, in a
yeah,
public way. It had come back around with Cube doing that like track by track breakdown, not that long ago. So I've been thinking about it again.
mm,
But yeah, I would say that of all the artists, Cube was the one who kind of hit me the earliest, I would say, out of all of them, because
mm,
that first record was what, 1991,
mm.
and maybe made kind of the longest lasting impression. So when you combine that with just the difficulty and edginess of it, I couldn't resist.
Do you like your art that way then, Shawn? Something that pushes you a bit of like not comfortable, like you said. It's not comfortable. Do you generally like your art that way, like films and beat books or whatever it be, maybe?
I mean, to an extent, I think there is a certain type of art that is uncomfortable that I can't mess with. Like
Mm,
my wife is a filmmaker and she loves Michael Haneke, and I sat through
mm.
Funny Games once, and I will never ever do it again.
Funny games is it's tough. It is tough.
So I will not, or Martyrs or whatever. I will say
Mm,
that there is a certain type of discomfort that I find very tough to deal with.
hmm
But yeah, I would say particularly in this case, like it's fine to, it would have been fun to talk about, oh, Tribe was great
mm,
and they used all these samples, and here's how they made a 3-bar loop work and all this kind of stuff. But
yeah,
it seemed more exciting to challenge myself,
yeah,
right? To try and say, I'm not even sure how I feel about some of this stuff, but
yeah,
let's
yeah.
just let's jump right on in.
I
Uh,
love
so
that.
so yeah, I guess to some of your questions, like yeah, some of the art that has had the deepest impact on me has been, you
Mm.
know, uncomfortable and challenging. I think you are, I think, a are you are in the UK?
Yep,
So
yep.
one of your former country, one of your former citizens, Sarah Kane, the playwright, had a very deep impact on me.
Oh, I'm
Um,
not familiar with her work really, Sarah Kane.
okay, so she was a playwright in the 1990s and is sort of associated with this type of, school of theater
Mm.
that came to be known as in your face theater,
Hmm.
YER, because, she was British.
Yeah, yeah.
And, and it was very confrontational and uncomfortable and to my mind, brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so there's plenty of art like that that I love, I would say for sure.
Ah, wicked. That's good to know, man. Ice Cube definitely fits in that. Ice
Yeah.
Cube's in your faceness is exactly that. One thing I did want to ask you as well in the episode, um, you just said America's Most Wanted is like the formative album. So I'm guessing that's your favorite album out of these three: Death Certificate, The Predator,
I
America's Most Wanted.
Yeah, I would say yes, because it was the one I listened to the most and it hit me at the right time. And also, as one of your commenters mentioned, the Bomb Squad, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm an absolute sucker for the Bomb Squad, those those second and third P records. I meet anyone involved in the making of them in any way at all, which has happened, 3 or 4 times now,
yeah,
and I kind of freak out. Keith Shockley or whoever, like
yeah.
it's, I met him at a friend's dinner party once and could hardly contain myself.
Wow.
um, and has since interviewed him on the Cipher, as some of your listeners may know, which was an incredible experience.
Mm,
But yeah, anyone in that milieu, that sound was so impressive to me, and I feel like, you know, I went back to it for so long
mm,
afterwards with even the samples, right? Like
yeah.
even like the grunt or whatever, to take the most obvious example,
Mm,
led me down this long thing of like, oh, the JBs and all of their work and all of this stuff, it was kind of a pivot, back to the past as well as,
yeah.
sounding at the time futuristic.
Yeah, I think, especially if you're a PE fan, going into America's Most Wanted, that Bomb Squad influence, incredible. I
Mm-hmm.
was thinking, obviously, mine was more West Coast, as I said on the episode, and
Sure.
just Death Certificate and The Predator. I just love how he pivoted to that sound and
Mm-hmm.
just made his own, and it really just resonates with me today. One thing I did want to ask about this run generally, but also just broadening it out to general album runs and consistency over a period of a few years. I never got to ask you what are the facets that make a classic great album run in your eyes.
Sure. I mean, this is interesting, right? Because it's more than just making, great to classic albums consecutively, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the literal, you know, jumping off point. But to me, it's something more than that. It's intangible, right? It's a sense that this person or this band or whatever can't miss somehow.
Yeah.
And I don't, they're trying new things,
Mm.
uh, and they're just kind of making every shot from anywhere on the court. It's a hot streak, if you will, and
Yeah.
there's kind of almost no explanation for when and why it starts and stops. It's
Mm.
it's a weird alchemy, like, and it goes across genre. Like, Stevie Wonder obviously had it for most of the 70s, which,
Yeah.
which was
Yeah.
shocking, and how
Yeah.
it could keep up that long. I think, even the Beatles, for all their world changing greatness, had hot streaks, and then they would run into a magical mystery tour or whatever,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
have their little down period. Um, you just can't. There's almost no accounting for it.
Mm.
I think almost in every case, it's this weird alchemy of you know, the artist is in the right time of their life and surroundings, and they're open to stuff, but not too open to, you know, let
Yeah.
let anyone in around them who has a bad idea or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's weird because, you know, your OutKast run, right? I think you kept it to be in the 90s, so you didn't include Stankonia. Maybe Stankonia's in there, but I think there's something, I don't know, like, it's a great record, but it's also not, you get the sense that they had started to split apart by then.
Yeah.
In a way that you didn't get on Aquemini. So
yeah,
even though it's a great album, would you consider it part of their like classic run? I know, again, for your purposes, chronology wise, you wouldn't, but I think it's kind of an open question.
I think I would. I've been listening to Stankonia again last week, actually, recently, and just like Gasoline, is it Gasoline Dreams, stuff
Gasoline
like that?
Dreams, yeah, that's the opener, right?
Yeah, and one of the best openers for me in albums. And I remember just thinking, man, that was like 20 years ago. That's the 2020 energy right now. Like, this could be made now by an artist like Denzel Curry, and you would be like, oh, of course, yeah. So I feel like there's something in that with OutKast. What you said there about what makes a good album run for you, and it being kind of like you can't even, you know, quantify it. It feels like to me there's a few different people I've talked to about album runs and stuff like that, and they like consistency. A lot of people I know like the same kind of flavor, the same kind of recipe, don't change it too much. But what I feel that these runs generally, but Q's for sure, does have is that variety of sounds. And although the themes are similar, man, he just turns them up and up and up. And by the time he gets to Predator, he doesn't care anymore. He's just like, yeah, just doing whatever he wants to do to Policeman. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, okay, that's interesting. What do you think then for Cube after this incredible run? We talked about how, like, you put it perfectly, the Chronic happened. It really changed just music generally. So obviously he was swept up in that. But what do you think was Cube's best work since Predator?
Wow, that's a good question. You know, I honestly am not sure. I may have to come back to you on that. I feel like, you know, he's definitely had ups and downs and moments that, you know, stuck out, and moments where he maybe sounded a little more rote. It's tough because I think most artists, with the exception of maybe like Miles Davis or something, only get to be in the whirlwind once, right? You only get to be in the center of the conversation, in the center of pop culture, in the center of hip hop, whatever you want to, however you want to say it, you only get that once, right? And it's sort of like everything you do after that, it can be excellent, but it's different. It's just not in that whirlwind.
Yeah.
You know, P could make 100 fantastic albums and they are not going to be Fear of a Black Planet just because they aren't situated as like the people who everyone thought had all the answers, who then blew up, you know, who then imploded, right? You can't get that feeling back. You can't get that narrative back.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry to put you on the spot now a little bit, just because I was thinking about that today, and I was thinking, I mean, I love Serial Killers with Dre. I think that is just one of the highlights of Cube for me generally. But I was thinking, yeah, when's the last project he's done where I've been like, wow, that's like blown me away? And there's been some good, like you said, highlights. It's just there's not been like something where I've been, wow, just blown me like this run. Like you said, you in the whirlwind, in the eye of the storm one time, and there you go. And he was in that.
I mean, I'm sure he's grateful not to be in it anymore. It sounds like it was a huge pain. You know, I certainly can't imagine that. I mean, I guess he's getting, you know, as you kind of hinted at the beginning, he's getting a little bit of it now.
He is.
30 years on.
I am definitely, we got to touch on this. We do have to touch on this. Before I do that, I did want to ask you
Mhm.
of these runs, and big up Lee Cam there, and everyone who's joined, by the way, big up. Uh, he's asking if we talked about Tribe Called Quest run yet, and we haven't yet. That's Rob Percy
Mhm.
coming up. He'll be in a few weeks. But I was thinking, if you hadn't picked Cube, and there was another run in this series that we're doing, which one would you have maybe gone for?
For sure. You know, sort of two things come to mind. I would say, out of New Jersey pride, that's my home state. Although I don't live there now, I
Yeah,
might have chosen Redman
big.
just to rep for Jersey.
Love that.
But that aside, probably OutKast. I was a little late to them in that I've
Mm-hmm.
only been listening for 22 years.
Yeah,
rather than 26 or so.
yeah,
I
yeah,
got into them around the time
yeah.
of Aquemini, 98, 99,
Mm.
and promptly went back and
Mm.
saw them live a couple times around the Stankonia period,
Okay,
actually,
at all.
which
Supposed to be
was
classic.
amazing.
Mm.
With Ludacris opening up the first time, actually, which was very funny.
Oh wow,
He was
Ludacris
he was
opened for
on his first
Stankonia.
record at that point. I think "What's Your Fantasy" was a big
Oh,
hit.
Southern Hospitality.
So that
Yeah,
was
love
something.
that.
Yeah, that was something.
That actually
Um,
reminds me. Sorry, Sean. I just
yeah,
remembered. This is so
please.
odd you said the Stankonia tour because I was listening to a podcast earlier. I cannot remember the guy's name. He's a journalist, but I can't remember his name. I really apologise. I can't remember it. But he was saying he was on the Stankonia tour and wanted to interview Dre. He was like, I want to interview both of them, but I only have one. I went for Andre. And he went to the tour buses and he said, like, Big Boy's tour bus was unreal. Like, it was just party time. Everyone's going at it. And he said, Andre's, there's literally nothing going on. You walked in, there was incense and just a man sitting there who looked a bit like a guru, not saying anything, just in the corner. And Andre was just there, and I just thought, this is exactly why I love OutKast. Like, strange, weird, like partnerships like that. Like, it's so different, yet they work so well together. So sorry to interrupt, but I had to bring that story.
Oh
So I just
no,
spoke to one.
absolutely. I mean, Jesus, I wish I was in music journalism back then to have had a
Yeah,
or in the hip hop world back then to have had a chance to talk to them.
yeah,
Unfortunately, not. Although I recently got to interview Big Boy for Complex, got to do a quick phoner, and
great.
it was incredible. As a sort of aside,
Mm.
he sang a snippet of "Ain't No Thing," just as sort of a like, I've been singing on records for a long time. Back to this, and sang like a little bit of the hook for that, and it made
Wow,
my month. Getting to hear him do that on the phone. So
that is awesome.
yeah.
That is awesome. Uh, well, yeah, I mean that's great. OutKast, I would love to have heard that. We've got
Yeah,
Justin Hunt
I
actually
would,
coming in OutKast.
I would,
That's really good.
yeah, I would say real quick. One other thing about OutKast is like for me, it would have been a good chance to go way sort of deeper into some of the Dungeon Family stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which I know, but not like the back of my hand, right? To get into
For sure.
like Witch Doctor and Joy and all of the crazy sort of like things. What was it? Future's first group. The name is escaping me now, but
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
I know what you mean. But yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
for Dungeon
yeah,
Family Volume 2 or whatever, second
yeah,
generation or whatever it was.
yeah.
Um, to delve into that world a little bit, and to talk
Mm.
about that would have been fun.
Yeah, man, definitely. Is there any? Uh, you always leave yourself open when you do little programs like this, and we did this series, and so many people say, "Well, hold on, why is this one not in here? Why is this one
Right.
not
What
in
about
here?
this? What about that? For sure.
What about this one? What about that one?"
Yeah.
Is there a run that you think that we should feature in a future series? Like, if we expand this, is there any runs where you feel like, oh, I'd like to talk about, or I'd like to hear about that 3-album run? 90s, obviously.
Sure. I think. Let's see. I just
Cool
check
Breeze from
release
Dungeon.
dates, but yeah, Cool Breeze. I think. I mean, look. Uh, like we talked about last time, certainly the Coup is one of my favorites, and I think they're sort of, you know, uh, had, they would go years between albums, but I think, any 3 they released in the 90s, to my mind, holds up to a lot of this stuff, for sure. So I think what would you say, from Steal This Album, for a couple, maybe record of before and after that, would be amazing.
Love that.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I'm sure you can find like,
I was thinking Naughty by Nature, one of them. That I do enjoy Naughty generally, and as we talked about formulas, like they do have that, and they had that hot moment where they just nailed that all the way through. And man, I love them. Big up our listeners, because I know they like Naughty as well. So we have to talk about it.
Someone saying Gangstar is in the list of episodes to come, so you will definitely get that for sure.
Yes, Dart Adams is bringing that. So we recorded that. It's Dart, man. It's Dart.
I mean, he was, probably in the room when, the group first formed or whatever. I know he goes really deep with Boston history.
So much good archive footage. Yeah, he sent me so much good archive stuff. Amazing. It's great. Master Ace, Slaughterhouse. I'm here for the Slaughterhouse. Just general chat. So Master Ace is great.
Of course, yes. How could I forget that? I mean, whether you include the solo album, the first album, or not, all of that stuff. I think that would be amazing. There's
been quite a few of these runs, the 90s, man. This is why we picked that. This is why we picked that era. Just with Cube, then obviously it would be remiss of us to do a conversation about Cube and not think about this contract with Black America, the stuff that's emerged recently about him pitching that to both parties in America. Generally, just wanted to hear your thoughts, with the disclaimer that we're not politicians, we're not political analysts. I'm purely a fan, and I just would love to hear what another fan like yourself is thinking about Cube right now.
Sure. I would say, first off, before I get into any of my thoughts, I would recommend Esther Armah wrote a really brilliant essay about this that you can find. And, Brittany Cooper, who is a fantastic writer and thinker, did an interview with a Washington Post podcast about it, about this issue and some other stuff as well. She touches on Megan Thee Stallion and a few other things. Okay. So first off, I would recommend, people check out what they have to say, because anything I have to say is, largely informed by them, not as articulate. And honestly, you should be listening to them before me on, matters of import to Black Americans anyway.
For sure.
So that said, I will say that I was disappointed at Cube. Trump has had a 40-year or so history of public racism, and the very first time he was in the New York Times over here was because his building was not renting to Black people, and the government sort of called him on it, and he eventually settled and whatever. But there, and things certainly have not gotten any better since then. And, these are real life or death issues. And I think a lot of people were upset that Cube would even, want to bargain with this administration. And I think all the more so because Trump has another decades long record, and that's of broken promises, right? He says he's going to do something. Every big, thing is 2 weeks away and never actually happens. So to even think that even if you could get promises out of him for $500 billion of this or for this or that, to think that he would follow through on it, I think is at best naive. Also, he is very, very real danger. And I think I would hope that sort of all hands would be on deck for getting him out, rather than, attempting to sort of bargain and get into, well, provide people with excuses to potentially vote for him. You know, Brittany Cooper in her interview breaks down a lot of this stuff around like the demographics of Trump having, higher approval ratings among Black men than other Republican candidates in recent years. And she sort of goes into maybe why that is and the issues with that. And so again, I would recommend, people kind of check that out for the details. Suffice to say, I was very disappointed and disheartened in this turn of events. And it's tough, I think, for anyone who remembers Cube as this like difficult, but in a lot of ways revolutionary figure, right? To see it to the point where Eric Trump is praising him on Twitter. And, and he should have known that was coming if he didn't, if he didn't, he should have known. Right. And he give the Trump family an inch and they'll take a mile and they'll make all the hay they can out of it. He certainly saw that with other Black public figures who evinced any support for Trump at all for whatever reason, including Kanye. And, Ice Cube can quote tweet that all he wants, but it doesn't get rid of
what's happened,
the damage it did, which is that it's there. And I think it provides people, both who want an excuse to vote for Trump because they imagine it's in their economic self-interest. And it also provides cover, I think, to people who want to vote for Trump but don't want to feel like they're racist. It provides cover for people who look like me in that respect too. And that's a shame.
I think you echo a lot of the sentiments I have in my own group. Also, just the questions it's arose. It made me think when this all broke, because we recorded our chat with Cube about Cube weeks ago.
In the middle of his last controversy, I might add.
Absolutely, yes. Oh my God, yeah, it really was. It really was. The anti-Semitism, the tweets that are getting sent with no care, really, I suppose. I think, I am not so much on social media as much as some people. So maybe I do just think seconds, 2, 3, 4 times before I post something. But even in the rush of the moment, I don't. If I'm angry, if something has angered me after all these protest movements, I was genuinely angry and feeling emotional. And I sent out a few tweets that, let's be honest, they were tinged with anger. So I feel like with Cube doing stuff like that, I couldn't stop thinking about when we were talking about him not being comfortable, having one sole care in the world. And that is, in the 90s, it was the Black male and the Black man. And then it was very community-led, bringing it to the global stage. This is community commentary. Savage, brutal, ferocious community commentary. And that was essential for people like me growing up that wouldn't see that anywhere else. Maybe Spike Lee, Public Enemy, there are other people, sure. But just generally, it's interesting to see that someone who had that. I kept thinking, has Ice Cube changed?
I think that's the big thing, right? Is what have you learned in 30 years? And I think Kiesi Lehman, phenomenal writer, was making a point along this line. I saw I think on social media, the idea being that Cube inspired so much great art, in particular, so much great Black art. And it does not appear that he has in turn dialogued with and learned from that. And I think maybe that's where stuff has fallen short, that his sort of, artistic progeny, as it were, his he's remained the same while they have taken what he's taught and grown and engaged with the world and learned. I mean, look, that said, I feel a little weird criticizing Ice Cube for any sort of political stance. Who am I, right? Yeah. And that's, again, why I tried to kind of lead with here's where you should go, I think, for for commentary about this. But yeah,
100%.
absolutely. I was disappointed, and it's disheartening to see the Trumps use him for political gain. One of your commentators noted, Trump was a beloved figure in hip hop circles for decades.
Really was.
And yeah, that's absolutely true, right? How
Really
many
was,
skits was he on someone's voicemail?
Yeah, absolutely. He really was. He gets so many lyric references. He's there, absolutely. And obviously the New York thing, so it's right in there with them. I feel like just before we move on from it, is just the caveat on that, which is I don't know how kind of angry and just kind of the lack of hope I would have in that situation. Someone who's been trying to make changes and, has done songs like, True to the Game, and people like, I don't know how much he's pushed it in the past, but I feel like you can't say, one of the things I did have a bit of like, people were talking about him being not qualified. And I thought, well, that's a little bit different nowadays, because I'm not qualified to talk about hip hop, but I talk about it. And a lot of people aren't qualified to talk about anything, but they have Twitter. And this is the case. And I feel like at least Cube has stuff, credit in the bank before making this kind of action that he wants change for the people he cares about. But I do agree. I think timing was very questionable. But again, I don't know how that feels. I don't know how that feels when you're trying to batter down doors. Everyone's saying no, 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 and then someone eventually says yes. Maybe I would have. Maybe I wouldn't have thought. I don't know. It's a tough one. But I appreciate your input on that, and I appreciate you bringing that the writers and the people we should all go to really read about this stuff. So, as always with Cube conversations, my friend, it's never easy. It's a never easy.
Exactly. It's always, there's it's always a big mix, right? There's the good and the bad, the comfortable and the uncomfortable, all up in there. And again, to kind of bring it back, I think that's why I chose him, right? It's to me, the most compelling. This uncomfortable, like, why would he do that thing, right? I think those are the people, those are the stories that are most interesting to me. I think there's like, this is a bit of a tangent, but kind of hear me out. I feel like I love the kind of history where, there is a figure who does a lot of things that seem to make sense and are maybe even admirable, but there's one sort of mystery, like, why did they do it in the middle, right? And I'm thinking of John Brown, who I think is a hero, certainly of mine, and I think maybe I assume of a lot of other people as well. And there's the Potawatomi massacre, right? Like, why did that happen? Was that really necessary? It's kind of this bit of violence that, some might argue absolutely was necessary by virtue of the people, being slaveholders. They were violent and the raid was justified. Others might say, oh, well, they were sleeping, and what was the need and all this kind of stuff. But it's a big kind of mystery, almost unanswerable thing in the middle of, an epic story. And Cube reminds me of that a little bit, I think, just in terms of, like, in the middle of these great works of art, there's stuff that's like almost unanswerable. This, like, why would he do that? Should that be there? Should is it inciting terrible stuff? Maybe. I don't know. Like, it's just sort of sitting there uncomfortably for you to engage with.
It's so interesting because it just makes me think of Black Korea, and it makes me think, like, then there probably were Korean fans of Cube hearing that, and the question of why has he done that is quite easily answerable in that situation because of the murder and the huge community backlash to that situation. But also, as you've just said there, it could really incite someone to do something like different. Like, okay, I don't.
It was a real tinderbox of a situation. And I think you said yourself, like, your family
Yeah.
Your family were
Own shops.
shopkeepers, right? Like,
Yeah. We're shop owners. I
certainly.
followed kids down the aisle, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's yeah. And again, it's the fascinating thing. I'm really glad that I got to talk to yourself about this run was the fact that there's so much complexity to this, the complexity to this one. Whereas maybe with a few others, it's a bit more ethereal or a little bit more like intangible. Like to talk about cubes is very much at the forefront. Very like there's no peripheral; it's straight there, and you can't ignore it. And I think that's the thing. I did want to move on to a few things.
for sure.
Generally, and I know people who've listened to the podcast, who've just followed us generally for the last few years on socials, have all just said, "Wow, this is like the Cipher," and I've been like, "I wish this was like the Cipher," but it just shows that the Cipher is this. For the people who are listening, the Cipher is a podcast you should all go check out because it's evergreen stuff, it's timeless stuff. You're chatting to legends at the same time as people like Combat Jack were doing stuff and stuff like that. You were right up there for me, getting stuff out of conversation I've not heard before. And I had to ask if you did get Cube on the Cipher.
Oh wow.
What would you really have wanted to ask him back then? So 2012 to 2018,
Wow.
2017.
What would I really want to? I mean, obviously, yeah. Again, if we're going back then, obviously nothing he's done now. I would say like, huh. Let me kind of pause on that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't mind. I think, man, there's so much. It's kind of asking like, it's the same thing. Like, what would you want to have asked Chuck D? What would I want to ask? Like,
for sure.
I think just like about gosh,
I think I may have
it may have broken my brain here. I think just what it was, just the I would say kind of where his head was at when this stuff was happening. It's hard to, it wasn't till after America's Most Wanted that a lot of the sort of maelstrom and hatred that he was talking about happened, right? It's almost like he was sort of predicting it. And I think I would have liked to have seen, what led him to write that, what led him to imagine, what frustrations was he feeling that he was just like, what, everyone hates me, everyone's saying fuck you, Ice Cube. Where was that coming from? I think he'd left a successful group, but by all accounts he was like doing pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where did that come from? Where were the pressures? Where was his head at? I think
that's brilliant. Yeah,
that would be one thing I'd be curious about. I'm sure there are a million other things that I will frantically message you about as soon as we get off here. But yeah, he is someone I would have loved to have talked to. We mentioned, I think, some others, and there are a small group of people that I would, the producer and I would bring the show out of retirement for, and just putting it out there in the world. Is that Shock G is definitely one. So, Shock, Hump, if you're out there,
we'll forward this to him. We got to.
Yeah, exactly. We're down anytime.
Damn, that's amazing. Because I was gonna ask about like that was gonna be like one of my closers, but I'm gonna ask it now. Like, could you see? I mean, podcast is different. It's a different world now. I feel like. Could you see it returning? Like, obviously, if you land Shock G or Cube, let's go in. But I don't know. Is it on your radar at the moment to go back into this world? I know you've done stuff with Spotify. I know you've done stuff on the 6ix9ine stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Cipher was a lot of work to produce, both for me and the producer, right? And it was most definitely a labor of love. We had some generous, Patreon supporters who helped offset some of the costs of website and storage and all of that kind of stuff. But it was by no means a money-making venture, right? And it is very labor intensive, I think, as listeners know, right? It took, all of the time that I had to spare to research and develop questions, and,
For sure.
booking was always struggle, all this kind of stuff. So like, were there a situation, some kind of magic situation where like, I could do it, Josh could do it, and we could both devote sufficient time to it and,
Yeah.
be able to afford to live somewhere? Maybe,
Yeah. Yeah.
certainly there were a couple meetings along those lines fairly early on that never quite took off. So, it's always beyond the potential one-off, which, is always, out there. Restarting it, maybe, we'll see. I mean, it is not certainly front of mind for either of us at this point. Josh is a successful podcast producer and, doing a whole bunch of stuff now. As you mentioned, I'm working on a number of shows through Complex, including, the infamous series with Spotify, which,
series,
season 1 out now. Go listen.
Yeah, big series. Go check that out.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, it is obviously about a different type of music than, a different type of hip hop than we're talking about here. But, it's a story, right? And that I think is worth digging into, right? It's a story about a number of things, including internet culture, including social media, and including the sometimes symbiotic relationship between rap and gangs, which is loaded and difficult and, thorny, particularly in this time of like people finally starting to notice over policing, right?
Yeah.
It can be, all of this stuff is entwined and difficult and thorny. And I think we, that season deals with it, the best that we could.
Yeah, no, really good. And obviously go out there, check that out. Just killed it with that. And that's what I was asking, like, to see where, if you can come in with anything else, Cipher-esque or even podcast-esque or just storytelling as well. I feel like your storytelling is something that could go in there as well.
Yeah, for sure. We are, working on several projects, several kind of narrative projects in the style of that first season of Infamous. Don't necessarily want to put out what they are yet, but they are sort of in that vein of dealing with, well-known and thorny, difficult stories about, young rappers. So, and I'm really pleased with how they're, going so far. So, be on the lookout for those, I would say, next year.
Look forward to that. Yeah, man. Is there anything, before we just leave the Cipher, was there, with the Cipher itself, what was your toughest interview? You're talking about thorny and stuff like that. Like, what was the interview where you went, wow, that was tough, man? That was tough. Do you remember one?
For sure. Look, I think off the bat, it was a very special type of interview where a lot of them were fantastic because, not to flatter myself or the way the show was made, but I think, I followed my interests and not, to sometimes my own detriment, wasn't necessarily interested in like, the most pressing, questions of the moment. Right.
Yeah.
But I think people appreciated that. They appreciated kind of the focus on the work. I think the most difficult one was Johnny Rotten. I got the chance to speak to him somewhat unusually. He was promoting a memoir, and, it was pretty out of scope of the rest of the show, obviously, but like, how could I turn that down?
Yeah, for sure.
And, as being from the UK, like, it's been his job for 40 years to kind of be an asshole professionally, right? And he's gotten really good at it. I don't know what, John Lydon as a person is like. I wouldn't pretend to have any insight into that, but, his persona has been to being a prickly, touchy guy for 40 years, and he's good at it. And, setting up, was difficult. He kicked a bunch of people out of the room. He complained about the temperature.
Really? Complained about the temperature?
Yeah.
Oh, Johnny, any excuse, isn't it?
I brought what I thought was a nice treat. The photographer, Jeanette Beckman, legendary photographer, had taken pictures of him back in the Sex Pistols and early Pill days. And I had become friendly with her. And so she came over to photograph that day. And, you know, they hadn't seen each other since the first, you know, the beginnings of Pill. He didn't recognize her particularly, but she tried to show him pictures that she had taken of him back in the day. So my eyes are bad. I can't see them. Get this out of here. Just no interest.
Yeah, it sounds, well, it sounds exactly like I thought Johnny Rotten may be.
Yeah. I still remember actually, Josh, a producer, he told me that, you know, Johnny brought a friend, Minder, or whatever with him.
Right.
And that guy scribbled down a note right before the interview started. And Josh was like, I looked over and I saw that it said, "Be nice."
So that he needs to know that.
Yeah. I mean, that said, look, the interview, when I listened back, sounded a lot less contentious than it felt.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is, you know, it's a unique listen, I think, as far as a conversation with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, we got into even some political stuff where we had disagreements, but, you know, I think got through it. I geared up as best as I could for the whole thing, being like, I got to ask him about this. I got to ask him about this. And did and survived. So, yeah, I mean, look, there have been other ones, too, where the guest was like a little out of it or a little too high, that we had to, you know, a little too hard to get coherent answers out of it, things like that. I won't mention any names, but that one was the one that was like, you know, actively the toughest for me.
That's interesting, but because just to wrap it up on that Cipher thing, for me, it's I'm not an interviewer. Obviously, I have interviewed, but that's come out of necessity more than anything. I've always been more of a producer, so to step into that realm of trying to guide a conversation or just hearing and reacting to people, I have to say that so much study has gone into your questions. I listen to not just the answers, but I love to just hear the formatting of questions and, oh, where are you actually trying to get to with that question? So I completely understand the effort, and it kind of is draining as well, I feel like, you know, sometimes after a big interview. So big up on that, man, because, yeah, I understand that it's a proper craft and it takes a long time to get really good at it. So, yeah, man, I appreciate that. I have to talk to you before you leave, though, Shawn, about,
of course,
your you did a piece that was, again, went everywhere on Rap Twitter, was everywhere, on Complex, why you should be paying attention to art rap. Now, before we dig in, people go out there, Google it. I have messaged it on there. I have tweeted it out. So go out there, go on our timelines, check it out. I think it was time for someone to really focus, because I do feel like podcasts like Dad Bod, Rap Pod, big up. They are out there talking to these people, these artists that have just been building and building and building. One, could you break down who that piece focuses on for the people here right now? And two, what made you want to go out and focus on?
Sure. So the piece was essentially about 4 artists as sort of a stand-in, you know, emblematic of stand-in for, you know, a movement. But I focused on, you know, Rap Ferreira, on Quelle Chris, on, you know, Elucid, and on Billy Woods, right? And, you know, I chose them, I think, because, you know, I think each of them, they have things in common, and I think they are all sort of approach things in this like uncompromising way. I think art rap, you know, is not my term. I got some grief on Twitter for using that in the title. I should say that, you know, that is not my term. That is not Complex's term. That is Open Mike Eagle's term. So all credit to him inventing that. It was sort of an analog to art rock, right? The kind of 70s,
Yeah.
Zappa, Yes, whatever stuff. And I think in this case, it's a useful term. And it's tough to pin down sonically. It's kind of tough to pin down lyrically. I think you can say experimental, you can say arty, you can say out there, whatever. I don't necessarily know if those are the most useful things. I would just say that these are people who are devoted to unique personal visions, and less concerned with, I'm sure they don't mind selling records, right? But less concerned with like doing things to be accepted in the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
They are sort of, from what I can see, very devoted to like their own personal, often weird and idiosyncratic visions. And so those four artists to me stuck out as being emblematic of that. Also, they work together, right, in various combinations. Elucid and Billy Woods are a group. Elucid and Rob Ferreira are a group. Quelle has all of these guys on his albums. They're all in each other's projects. Whatever. So there's some interplay there as well. And I think that was the other thing, that it seemed like they were part of a community of artists who were kind of often working together and sharing ideas.
Yeah.
So that was another reason for it. Shout out to Dad Bod Rap Pod, by the way, also, who has, as you correctly point out, has been championing these artists for a long time. Quelle, I've been a fan of and considered lucky enough to consider a friend. Like the other guys I didn't know personally before starting the story, but became really, was really big admirers of all of them.
Ah, that's interesting. Do you think you were listening, because obviously we've all been listening to hip hop in the last few years and it's changed a lot from the 90s. Do you think you were waiting for something new when they came out, or did it just kind of surprise you and you found something in it that you couldn't really find anywhere else?
I think the latter, in that, it's like when you get there, it's like, oh, where has this been? And in my case, the answer was, it was there bubbling for a number of years, and it just sort of had to, raise its head above water to the point where I saw it, which for me was the Billy Woods record that got all of the notice, the one with Kenny Siegel, right? That got critical notice and mentioned in, Time Magazine or whatever.
Especially Time. Wow.
I think I am somewhat embarrassed to admit that was my sort of introduction. I went back from there to, to the stuff with Elucid and all of that. And they'd been making music of that caliber for a number of years prior. It just, I hadn't noticed. So I guess the it wasn't till I sort of got it and I was like, oh, the, especially like, the stuff that, Elucid and Billy Woods make together, right? Arm and Hammer. I think it's almost like the noise in your head, right? The conversation in your head in this kind of like internet besotted age, right? The way they use references, the way their thoughts work, the layers. It's kind of like stuff is always going and connecting and weaving in and out, and the two of them capture that in a way that I just haven't seen basically anywhere. Sorry, Cat Glimmer decided to take a little visit here. There you go. Why don't you go down there?
Just a fan of art rap. Just a fan of art rap.
Exactly.
Just wants to get involved.
Couldn't resist. But yeah, so that article, I got to talk to all four guys for it, which was amazing. Got to go into, all of their backgrounds a little bit, got to talk to Milo, especially about like his love of freestyle fellowship and a lot of, his sort of artistic precursors. Another thing I would say that these guys have in common is dealing with, is dealing with blackness, right? Dealing with like the artistic lineage of, from the Black Arts movement, both like being heavily engaged in, the Black Arts movement of the 60s and 70s, but then also like the politics of today, right? And
Yeah.
everything in between, and reckoning with that. So that was also like, I wanted to let them address that in the story as well.
Because I think it has been time for these people to get shine. They get in. I'm like you, I gained them late. It's funny that we talk about gatekeepers in the 90s and how they're kind of gone, but it was people like Dad Bod that really, and Passion of the Wise, it was people like that actually got me into this, and it was only through them I would have really listened to Elucid, Billy Woods, and well, to be fair, Open Mike Eagle is one of them people that I feel like, because he's been around for a while, or it feels like he has to me, that he was just a natural extension for me. It went from, I remember my habits going from 90s, boom bap, beat tapes, and then hearing Mad Villainy. And Mad Villainy, obviously, what more can you say about that record? It's timeless, it's a classic, blah, blah, blah. I think one of the things that Mad Villainy did for me as a big Doom fan was me realizing, oh, actually, you can just make whatever you want now. Like, you don't need a hook. You don't need song structure. You can just make a 1 minute 30-second thing and just call it Figaro or whatever. Like, there were so many things in it that that kind of changed my thinking. And then Open Mike Eagle extended that in his real weird approach to music. And then I think it was just, honestly, was people like Odd Future. It was people like Death Grips. And those are the really odd outside, apart from Odd Future, they were very big generally, but that, like, they weren't the norm. And I feel like until they started doing their Saturday Night Live performances or whatever it was with, I think it was Sandwiches, that performance is one of the best performances I've ever seen in my life on TV. Sure. I think that's interesting how that all kind of germinated, and now, if that's a word, and now we're at this place where you write this piece and it becomes so natural. And I was like, wow, yeah, like, we're at that place now. And like you said, community, not just them working together. Hello, there we go.
Hey, Glimmer, say hi. Say hi to Cam. Okay. All right.
It's not just them working together. It's us fans working together. It's buying the merch. It's buying, like, they want, I think Shrines, the live, I didn't get to watch it, but
it's
the
fantastic.
Shrines, yeah,
fantastic.
and even the merch. I was like, wow, like, the merch is sick. Like, that's just interesting to me how I feel different to that, to listen to that, to someone like maybe even Freddie Gibbs, because I love Freddie Gibbs, but I don't feel there's a community there like there is with Rat Ferrara. And when he's bringing, my God, we mention him in tweets and he's tweeting us out, and like, just naturally, not even like, and that feels like a community to me. So I'm glad that you brought that home, and I do feel like people should go visit that article. Do you think people who aren't aware of this scene so much, are there any records you would maybe recommend to get them into it?
Sure, absolutely. I would say that 1 second, and we'll get that to you. Sorry, 1 second.
No,
obviously, I would say for sure that Paraffin, the Arm & Hammer record, before this most recent one, was the thing that absolutely, blew my mind, got me into that. Certainly Shrines as well.
Yeah.
Billy Woods' Hiding Places, I think, is, would be something that I would say to get into. Purple Moonlight Pages, Rep Ferrara's latest. Basically anything Quelle, Chris. I think his most recent record with Chris Keys, I think,
brilliant.
Yeah, Innocent Country 2 is incredible. Guns before that, like, I would say maybe those two are, and Being Used, great. I don't know. There's a lot, but I would say, Innocent, in some ways, a lot of these guys are at their peak now, which is one of the things that was so exciting to me. So, like, even if you were to just start with, Shrines, with
Yeah.
Innocent Country 2 with Purple Moonlight Pages, like you would be
Yeah.
right on it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, man. I love
You
it.
know, it's interesting you mentioned Odd Future too, because one of the kind of threads, subtexts in my piece is, you know, Earl Sweatshirt as sort of like part of this crew, a sort of younger, you know, a kind of like younger subset of it. You know, he
Yeah.
hugely admires Billy Woods as a rapper, which he's not shy about saying. He appears on some of these guys' records. You know,
Yeah.
he is sort of like a bridge figure in a lot of ways, in that he has a certain amount of commercial popularity from his time without Future, but his aesthetic now is very much in this like challenging, you know, art rap universe.
Yeah, man. Earl's latest stuff though is right in there with it as well. Just experimental. Just, do I like this? You know,
Right.
when you hear something, like, do I like this, or am I trying to convince myself I like this? And I was in that place a lot with his. Is it Same Songs? Can't remember what it's called now. The last one that he did, which is, yeah, and eventually it got to the point where I was like, I have heard it so much I can hear that other rhythm. You know, when you really have tuned into it, and I get enjoyment out of it. I don't know if it would be like one I would put up there as like, oh my god, the best. Like, I think Instant Country 2 is right up there because the melodies are there, everything is there, like all the best parts of the recipe, like I said, just peaking. And as I talked about Cube, there's only a certain amount of time you're in that eye of the storm, and they're not right in that public eye, but I think in this community field, this is, yeah, right on that, man.
For sure.
Shawn, thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for coming on, and just for one thing, just like widening this Cube conversation. People who've logged on, thank you everyone for jumping on and just commenting, and big up all you guys. We will put this on Instagram as well, so everyone can check it out. But yeah, I mean, it just leaves me with a few things I wanted to ask you. That I bag for the Crate 808 mailbag episodes that we do, and the responses are amazing. There's so many weird things that people want to get in touch about. So I thought I just wanted to ask you about two things. One, where's the weirdest place you've met a rapper, if you have one?
That, let me see. That's a very good question, and I feel like, let me think about that for a second, because there's certainly, like, most of the time I meet them, it's in sort of prearranged, like,
For sure, absolutely, yeah.
We have an interview. I think one thing that comes to mind is, you know, I've met, gosh, I think it was met Raw Digga once at a diner in Brooklyn, sort of unexpectedly joined our party.
Oh, wow.
I was with a mutual friend, and she popped in.
How is she?
So that was fun. It was great.
Yeah.
And then I think also, like, this was prearranged, but it was still amusing. The one time I interviewed Styles P was at his juice bar in the Bronx. And so that was...
Styles P has a juice bar. Brilliant.
Yes. So brilliant. I got to meet him and enjoy a nice juice while I was asking him some questions. So
that's great.
Those are kind of two things that come immediately to mind, for sure.
That reminds me of watching F That's Delicious, Action Bronson, and that in his latest series. Rapper Big Noid is just in there, and he loves soup. Like, he's at this like real boutique-esque soup place in the middle of New York, just not Big Noid. And I was like, what? I would never put the two together, but this is the fascinating thing, man.
I will say, speaking of unusual things, like, years and years ago, I had met DJ Muggs, and he invited me. You know, he said, "Oh, I'm recording tomorrow. You should come through." And so, you know, how am I going to say no to that, right?
Wow.
And so naturally, I availed myself of the opportunity, and I got there, and this was, you know, pretty early on in my kind of like rap journalism career. And Mayhem Loren was there. They were working on the record that they would eventually put out a number of years later. This was, you know, very, very early on in that process. And there's this older white guy in the room, and I don't know why he's there. And they just keep calling him, calling him Dante. And I was like, wait, is that, hold on. And I'm like surreptitiously trying to Google, like do an
Dante.
image search
Yeah.
to see if it's Dante Ross, because I didn't know
Is it
what he
Dante
looked
Ross?
like. And sure enough, it was. Yeah.
Dante Ross is just chilling there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would love to get him on the pod, actually. He has actually said he would like to come on, but I'm hoping that happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Fascinating. That's fascinating, man.
Yeah.
That recipe's great. But I love that with Muggs, and we had Muggs on the pod, and he's just great. He's just spot on, real, really just honest and real. And I love that about him. And
what a history with that guy, man. Like just going back to 783 or whatever, like the early groups.
Yeah.
So much of West Coast rap literally runs through his hands. Like it's kind of amazing.
And he's still doing it. That's the thing. He'll still drop stuff now. With Rome Streets, I think he's got some stuff coming out, and it's just like fire. You're like, wow. Like, this is the thing. Like, I do feel like hip hop is a bit different to other genres in the fact that someone like Muggs can still do fire. Like, and I don't. Maybe I wasn't as much into rock or when I was younger, but I just didn't see it. I just didn't see that longevity of, like, when Dave Gilmour makes new albums, they're for old white men. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not gonna lie, I think my soul may be old white man, because I do feel like they later on Dave Gilmour albums have something about them that I enjoy, but it's not like this.
Right.
I feel
not like it was when he was 26 or whatever. Like it's not. Yeah.
Exactly. And Lee Camp, big up. Cypress Hill 3-album run, great. Yes, exactly. But this is the thing. I feel like there's a longevity to this culture, and it comes down to people like yourself and people out there who big up all the podcasts and all the people out there who are doing these interviews and shining light on it. And I think it just helps it grow, and more and more people can listen. And yeah, man, I'm there for it. But Shawn, thank you, man. I look out for your next work. I can't wait to see it. Hopefully, we can get you back on again at some point. I want to do I have a few things I have on the plates, like spinning plates, but I've enjoyed our chat so much. It's an honor, really, to chat to someone like yourself. But I am wanting to do a woo-centric series at some point. So I may approach you about that on the side into your DMs. And
for sure, I'm looking forward to it.
But yeah, man.
I don't have nearly the insight that my dear friend Sophia Chang has on Woo.
Yeah.
Everyone go buy her book, by the way.
Yes, that's stick in the room. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Check out the interview with me today. She was great. She was really good.
Yeah, but I do what I can. But thank you so much, Cam. It has been a thrill. Everyone listen to the episode and all the other episodes of Crate 808. And
thank you,
and I'll talk to you soon.
Oh, perfect, man. Peace to the cat and the fam. And do your thing, man. Keep doing your thing. Smash it.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers, man. Peace.